Hey everyone, and welcome to or back to my channel. My name is Ariana and I would consider myself an amateur photographer. So one of the big things about 2021 is that I really wanted to I wanted to spend a lot of time this year pouring just time, energy, and my passion into photography, and I thought it would be nice to document it on YouTube alongside of that, just through a series of videos. So today I wanted to start it off with a 2021 camera gear video. This is something that I know will change during the course of this year, but I wanted to just start off the year showing you what I am using to shoot both photo and video with, as well as some of the accessories that I am shooting with. So the first piece of gear or equipment is the camera that I'm currently filming on, which is the Olympus OM-10 EM1 Mark II. This is my latest acquisition. I want to say I got it a few months ago, but I finally upgraded my digital camera body. So I'm really excited to get to play around with this camera, both for photography, and it will be my main video camera, especially during these sit-down videos, because the setup is working really nicely for me so far. Although, again, since I am so new to it, I'm sure it will change in the next few months. My next digital camera body is actually the camera that I upgraded from. So I used this camera for years. I want to say I got this camera in 2018 and it is now 2021. And I have just done so much with it. It is honestly such a great size for travel, which is the main reason why I got it to begin with. I used to have a Canon DSLR and it was just way too big. I'm a very small person, so carrying it around in a backpack was just adding a ton of weight and a ton of size to it. The Olympus OM-10 EM10 Mark II. And I got it used for about $300, and that was 3 years ago. Even their Mark III of this camera is available new for around $500. I would highly recommend the EM10 Mark series just for beginners, hobbyists, or if you want a really great quality travel camera. I bring it on hikes, I bring it on trips. I've done a ton with this camera and the size has never been an issue for me. Quality of the images are really great and I've just taken a ton of great photos with this 16 megapixel camera. Digital lenses. Starting off is the kit lens. This is the Olympus M.Zuiko 14-42 3.5. The model that I got used was actually this larger one that is not the pancake version, and it is a manual zoom. So you can't just like press plus on your camera, you have to actually manually zoom it, which I actually prefer a lot more. Just having that control. And then I have the Olympus wide angle converter on top of it, and this is the lens setup that I used for a very long time for hiking and landscape photography when I wanted that super wide angle view and I just wanted to capture a lot of the environment around the subject. I ended up picking up a telephoto lens for just extra variety in my photos. But this is the Olympus M.Zuiko 40-150mm lens. So as you can see, it's got a pretty good amount of zoom. I typically do not pull this lens out, although I always pack it because I never know when I'll want that extra zoom, the extra focal length, if there's something out in the distance, whether that's a beautiful skyline or honestly just an animal. I'm not a wildlife photographer by any means, but I've been to places where there are just cute little rodents and squirrels and whatever, and I like to capture them with a zoom lens. It's always such a great option to have, even if it is not one of my primary lenses. For quite a few years, I actually shot with primarily those two lenses, the Olympus kit lens and the telephoto lens. But after realizing that I wanted that wider angle, I decided to start looking for another lens that was gonna give me a slightly wider angle without requiring the size of putting on that wide angle converter. So I ended up picking up this lens used from a local camera shop. It is the Panasonic Lumix 12-32. Now this thing is really tiny, if you guys can see that at all. So when you combine this lens with this camera body, it is quite a small setup, but quite a good one with really beautiful photos as well. So Olympus is a micro four thirds system, which means that it does work with Panasonic lenses, which is another way to add versatility to your gear setup, as well as seeing if maybe Olympus doesn't have the lens that you want, Panasonic does, and this was the case for this one. I thought 12-32 was a super versatile focal length for me and what I did, which was a lot of hiking and just these wider angle landscape type of photography shots where I wanted more of the environment in it. And so getting into my prime lenses, which is basically the area that I am trying to focus a lot on, is shooting with two primary prime lenses that I own. One of them being the Meike 35mm f1.7 lens. This lens puts out beautiful images, and it was $70 on Amazon, which is probably the main reason why I got it. I was definitely a little bit hesitant with cheaper lenses. You're often not going to get great quality. There's gonna be a drawback. There's a reason why it's so inexpensive. The makeup of it feels really nice and sturdy and good quality, which again I was really pleasantly surprised about for such a cheap lens. I think the main thing that makes it so inexpensive is the fact that it's a fully manual lens. So not only are you controlling the aperture on the lens itself, there's an aperture ring, but you are also relying on 100% manual focus. And this is something that I've actually started to grow accustomed to, but there are definitely a handful of shots during every shoot where I just ever so slightly miss focus. But because I shoot film as well, and honestly focus has always been something that I'm continually working on, I don't mind it on this lens at all, and if anything, it's nicer to have it on digital where I can see right away when I misfocus and reshoot either the same shot or something similar. So I love this lens. I would highly recommend it if you're on a budget. Again, there are much better pro lenses with autofocus and works well with your camera, but if you're looking for something under 100 bucks, I would highly recommend it. Alright, and then my last acquisition in terms of lenses is the lens that I am currently shooting on. So this is the Olympus M.Zuiko 17mm f1.8 lens. So compared to a prime lens like this, you're going to get a wider field of view, like you can see, but it also still gives a very shallow depth of field with a low aperture and being able to have that beautiful bokeh effect. The one thing I would say is if you're shooting portraits with it, especially in times like this, to get a very similar effect, you're going to have to go way closer to your subject, which is again why I actually like using the 35mm more often for portraits and the 17mm more often for like environmental landscape shots. If you were doing street photography, it's a great street photography lens. This combined with the 35mm has been pretty much all I've needed in the past few months, and I think, you know, going into 2021, shooting on these two prime lenses will become much more of a norm for me. For my last digital camera related piece of gear is my GoPro Hero 7 Black. And I just have it on this shorty tripod, which is super great for behind the scenes shots. I bring it on a lot of hikes with me. All of it is super easy to shoot on a GoPro because the quality is actually still very good. And having it on a tripod and being able to just click record without having to fiddle around with multiple camera bodies makes it super easy to film some of those B-roll or behind the scenes shots, and so I love the GoPro. On top of the fact that I do snowboard, or if I'm going into swim in a lake, shots like that, the more adventure-y stuff, the GoPro really is made for. It is an action camera, and I definitely use it for those type of shots as well. So now moving on to my film camera setups. I shoot both 35mm and medium format film, or 120 film, and so I do have a handful of camera bodies that I use for that. So the first one that I actually got was the Olympus OM-10. Part of it was brand loyalty to Olympus. The other half of it was the fact that this film camera is great for beginners because it is an aperture priority camera, which means you set the ISO to your film box speed or whatever adjustment that you want to make to that, and then you adjust your aperture, and from there the camera will determine the shutter speed for you. There is a manual adapter on this that allows you to actually switch to fully manual if I just toggle it over down to there, but I would say I primarily use this camera for a little bit faster style of shooting, so I never really use it on fully manual. So I do love this camera so much. It is really my go-to to shoot 35mm because you get 36 exposures per roll versus much less in medium format. So it's nicer to have the extra exposures in there with honestly arguably really great quality photos, especially if you're just sharing it on web. So next is my medium format film camera, which is the Fuji GS645S, which is a long name, but ultimately the 645 means it's a 6x45 negative, which is the smallest sized negative for medium format cameras, and therefore making it, one, a really great beginner camera because you're getting more exposures per roll of 120 film, but also at the same time it's just a really great size, which makes you want to bring it out and shoot with it. The one thing I will say about this camera that has honestly made me start looking at other cameras more, like the Pentax 6.7, one day when I decide to spend the extra money to upgrade it, is the fact that it's a rangefinder, and sometimes for me it's just really difficult to focus with a rangefinder because I just can't seem to find the ghost image, so I end up zone focusing to the best of my ability and honestly just hoping that it turns out. In terms of extra lenses for my film cameras, the OM-10 actually came with the 50mm f1.8 lens on both of the OM-10s that I own, so I do have two of those lenses and they're beautiful lenses. But like I said, knowing that I came from more of a landscape background where I wanted that wider field of view, I actually decided to invest in a 28mm lens just to see, you know, if I would end up using it. It's okay. I mean, it's a great lens, but I really underestimated how versatile the 50mm lens is. It is so versatile that I rarely ever reach for this lens. Even if I'm going hiking, the 50 is wide enough to get a very beautiful view of where I am. Like I said, I just never reach for this one that much, but it's a great lens to have. It's so inexpensive, and I'm sure there will be times in the future where I definitely get my use out of it. So lastly are my camera accessories. So the first thing is a lens hood. Now I have a lens hood on both of my prime lenses. Honestly, a lot of the times it's just, if I'm shooting other people, I don't want that sun glare. It could be artistic for me, but I don't know if that's something that they will want. So I do utilize the lens hoods. Another thing is UV filters. These don't really make that big of a difference for me, but I've pretty much always had a UV filter, even in my Canon DSLR days, on all of my lenses, more as a form of extra protection and an extra layer between elements and your lens glass. So that's another accessory that I definitely utilize. Another one is variable ND filters. So these are really great for sunny days. They're basically like sunglasses for your camera, and they adjust how dark you can get them, so you can actually utilize a longer shutter speed or maybe a more wide open aperture without your photo being too overexposed on a sunny day, and that's where these come in really handy. I figured I would just mention the microphone that I'm currently using. It is by Meike on Amazon. It was like 30 bucks and it works pretty well, so I'm gonna keep with it for now until I decide I want or need to upgrade. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm definitely excited to see what pieces of gear I utilize more in 2021 and how I can grow my photography and change my style depending on what I'm shooting with. So the biggest focuses for me this year are definitely shooting with primarily prime lenses on my digital camera and just shooting overall much more film. So if you are not already, be sure to subscribe down below, give this video a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video.